Good Yantiv, Gemar Chatima Tova. Hanishamalach, Ve'aguf Poalach, Chusana, Al Amalach. The soul is yours, and the body is your creation. Have compassion on your handiwork. It was one of those COVID days in our home, about a month and a half ago. My young kids were screaming in the background, and the afternoon sun was coming in through the windows. And I got a call that my mother was going through a health crisis. And at first it was nothing too serious. She headed out as precaution to the clinic in Jerusalem at 11 p.m. But then suddenly she was in the ambulance, racing to the hospital. And it looked like it might be the end. And I was reeling 6,000 miles away, as were all the members of my family. For that moment, everything else just faded away. And I spent every minute, every second on my phone waiting for an update. It was the beginning of a 2-day period where all my thoughts and feelings were intense and blurry. I felt I was not speaking well to the people around me. And in my mind, I was trying to sort out my regular thoughts and my crisis thoughts. It was all a big jumble. As it became very clear, as it does in such circumstances, when we do, all of us go through them, I could see very easily what was wrong in my life. It had been turning in my mind in the background, but I hadn't been paying attention to it. But now suddenly I saw it crystal clear. The relationships that I needed to fix, now just gripped with many emotions. It's part of life. After more than 24 hours in the ICU, my mother was transferred to a medium-level ICU for those who are not in immediate life and death emergency, but still need around-the-clock care. My mother was what you could call awake. She could talk, she could move, but that was all. Her usual self was not there in the slightest. It was a completely different person. A condition that apparently happens to people who are suffering from extreme deficiency of sodium. And we were told that they usually do come back to themselves, but because of the nature of the treatment, that there had been a big mistake early on, and the fact that she had shown no real improvement in 24 hours, well, the doctor was concerned about her condition and her recovery and said it was too early to tell. For us, there was fear, then just sadness. This is life. It's very hard. But then we were very fortunate to experience a true miracle. When my father went into the ward on Shabbat morning, he was surprised to see my mother there, sitting up in bed, totally alert, her face animated with a huge smile and radiating light and well-being in every direction, and still shaken by everything that happened in the last 36 hours. My father turned to her and said, "Are you with us today?" And my mother beamed back at him and said, "Of course." And then he knew my mother was back, and what a beautiful soul she was. And when I saw her on the phone some hours later, I saw how shining she was. She and all the staff kept saying, "You look so very healthy." And when a senior physician at that Jerusalem hospital came to write a report about all the different patients, he looked at her chart and then at my mother and said she spontaneously came back to full awareness this morning. We do not know how or why, but thank God she did. And even the next day, when the senior physician of the department came to do the rounds of all the interns behind him, he listened to the case, looked at my mom, and then told the interns, "Her vital signs are fine, her sodium levels are acceptable, she looks the very picture of perfect health. Let's get her out of here before we do her any harm." And it was like a light had suddenly switched on. there she was. What I took out of it, one of the things I took out of that day was, we have these bodies, we have these personalities, these exteriors, but that's not all that we are. And that was just a shell. And she could speak and she could interact, but it simply was not my mother. But then she woke up and suddenly she was fully present. It was her times 100. It was so obvious. We have these exteriors and behaviors, but that's not who we really are. And without that extra dimension, it's not truly us. And I thought this is what it means to be a human being, a Ben Adam, a child of Adam. When you see it, you don't think that it's just higher cognitive function. It's what it feels like, soul, true life. It was amazing, the difference between the two. And that thought has kept with me. And why I wanted to share this very personal story with all of you, because it tells such a vital and uplifting message and truth about who we are and how we choose to lead our lives. And it is what this day of Yom Kippur is about, what we're doing here, praying and fasting and gathering. It is a realization that opens up many doors for a human being grown numb through the vicissitudes of life, through the habits to regulate our lives, through the physicality of daily life, being creatures who do all the things that we do. And one door is that we remember how precious each and every moment can be with our loved ones and with ourselves, if we are truly experiencing life from that place. And a colleague and mentor of mine, Rabbi Eli Spitz, who I hope to bring here one day in person, is a leading authority in grief counseling. A lot of his work is he tries to guide families in their final hours before their loved one departs to that place of soulfulness. And he says, this is what you do with a deathbed and what you say to each other. I am sorry, I forgive you, do not worry, I love you. And to not have regrets in life is to live from that place of truth and deep humanity, not just at the end or in moments of crisis, but all of our days. As Bronnie Ware, a palliative care nurse who spent decades experiencing and researching the regrets of the dying, wrote, "What is the top regret of the dying? I wish I'd had the courage to live the life true to myself." And sometimes it takes confronting death and our own insignificance to remember who we are and what we want. As the ethics of the Fathers, Pirkei Avot, in the Mishnah, our first collection of rabbinic wisdom, teaches, Achavia ben Machalel said, "Mark well these three things and you will not come into the power of sin. Know from where you come and where you are going, and before whom you are destined to give an account and reckoning. From where do you come? From a putrid drop. Where are you going? To a place of dust, of worms, and of maggots. And before whom are you destined to give an account and reckoning? Before the sovereign of sovereigns, the Holy One, blessed be He." As the Mishnah elsewhere says, this whole world is a prosdor, a corridor to the world to come. Now on Yom Kippur, everything is geared to push us to confront that mortality. And this day, Yom Kippur, is as close as we have as a meditation on death. If physical life is so passing, just drops and dust and worms and maggots, in our soul life, our essence is completely the opposite. When my mother was smiling and I saw that essence so clearly where it wasn't before, I had no doubt that what was before was not her. And the part of her and that was now before me would go on someday to some other life when she left this world. We have that same experience in other moments in our life with a newborn child that wakes us up to the miracle of life, and we say, wow, this is truly a divine being. And there are other moments when we find this inner space in prayer or listening to a masterpiece of music. We wonder, how could a human being create such a thing of beauty? And I often feel like that listening to Mozart's music. We're contemplating the complexity of life and the incredible odds needed for life to exist in this world. And even the most scientific of minds will admit There is more than we can understand here or to work here. What is the meaning of this, of knowing this? It changes everything. It is the most important realization. It fills our life with purpose in this world. And the rabbis were geniuses at creating the circumstances that would bring us to this realization, and the Bible is too. And then there comes, in those periods of extreme hardship, we can also touch on that truth, receive a profound insight about what existence is about and what's real and what's not, as we all are now going through this pandemic, this hardship, this nightmare. Hardship wakes us up. It forces us to see the problems. It reminds us there is something beyond the difficulty of the present. And at the same time, this is something that's in the back of our minds, an urge and yearning that is always there. It's why there are so many self-help books out there, and why so many people consult with psychologists and therapists, because they want to touch and live from that deeper part of life. And understand there is a way to go through all of it being more aware, more present, and more loving, and more fulfilled. And we think about this in so many different times throughout our lives. For example, when we meet those people that we feel, wow, this person is so authentically themselves. Everything they do comes from that place within themselves of who they are. It's just beautiful to behold. And we just see everybody's drawn to them, and we're drawn to them because we think, how can I lead my life a little bit more like theirs? And the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidism, he asks, well, if God's name is Shalom, peace, wholeness, and stillness, then why are we so broken and so restless? Shouldn't we, his creations, have some of that rest and some of that peace? He says we feel our restlessness, we feel our brokenness because we're disconnected from our true selves. And therefore, we were given a 1 day a week, Shabbat, to seek out our wholeness. We're given 1 day a year, Yom Kippur, Shabbat Shabbaton, the Sabbath of all Sabbath, to really deeply find our soulfulness and to reflect on who we are and what our lives are about and to not be so restless. It's always surprising to me when we hear those findings of the regret of those who are passing away, as Bronnie Wares that I quoted a little earlier, that the number one regret of the dying is not spending more quality time with your loved ones, but it is number two. And that is because that number one, having the courage to be ourselves, directly impacts number two, how we are in our relationships. And that when we realize that there is a way to live where we focus on more than our exteriors, we also realize that all the others around us are more than just their exteriors. And normally we fail to see how much there is to a human being. We walk around our lives and we just see the external facade, even of our loved ones much of the time. And there's so much outside stuff that gets in the way from really seeing and being in connection with who's in front of us. It's very difficult to access. But then when we do have such an experience, it awakens us for a period to suddenly see that deep humanity in all the people around us. We love the stranger because they're not so strange anymore. And we work to take care of the orphan and the widow because we do not want them to be so lonely in their plight. Because we realize we share a common humanity, all of us. And we stop misinterpreting the words and actions of our loved ones because we have a clear eyes and a clear heart. And we see them as they should be seen, as they would like to be seen, and as we ourselves wish to be seen. And we grow inspired in our life to contribute to our beautiful world. Because from that realization, we hold this truth to be self-evident, that all human beings are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these are life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness. And that there is no time to be wasted in that pursuit. We can't wait to live with that thoughtfulness until some future date when the stars align. It has to be lived right now in this moment. When my mother was ill, I felt such a kinship with all other people whom I knew, even if I didn't contact them, but whom I knew in that moment were also going through an ill or dying family member. And I knew we shared this outlook. All the other stuff of life, who cares? And I thought, this is why when we're mourners, our tradition asks us to say, may God comfort you among all of the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. To remind us that there is a community that we're joining, a community not just of mourners, but of all those who see life with that stark clarity and honesty, and who know how precious a human being is and how important each moment is with them. And that community has a role to teach everyone else. And that we won't know that it's from that place of soulfulness, of seeing the soul in others, that we wish to create the concerns that fill our minds throughout our days. Now, tradition teaches that when the children of Israel received the 10 Commandments on Mount Sinai, their souls departed from their bodies, says the Midrash, with every divine word that they heard. As they heard the 10 Commandments, their souls departed from their bodies. And in the aftermath of that great moment, our sages believe the children of Israel were just living from that place of soulfulness. And as a result, they didn't actually need originally to receive the rest of the Torah. And they didn't even need to build a tabernacle. They just were fine where they were because they were naturally taking care of each other, living in a world with kedusha, holiness. And they fulfilled all the mitzvot naturally by being themselves. After all, what are all the commandments between a human being and his fellow about? They're about being kind and supportive, about seeing your neighbor as yourself. But in the aftermath of the episode of the golden calf, when they abandoned all those high ideals and aspirations and lost that place of interconnection, God realized He had to give them more teaching and He had to give them tools that would help them find that soulfulness again. And we still have those same tools. Shabbat and holidays and worship and commandments to take care of our world and our fellows. And they are the heart and the soul of our tradition, what we try and pass on from generation to generation to generation. And ultimately, the purpose of all these traditions and practices is to empower us to see the Tselem Elohim, the image of God, in our own selves and then in all other people around us. That part of us that cannot be seen but is our very essence, that is the image of God, but Tselem Elohim, perhaps the most fundamental idea of Judaism. And yes, we do all look different, as the Mishnah says. Human beings are different and coins are all stamped the same. We are all different. But there's also a part of us that is all the same, a part of us that's beyond the physical, where we all share in the image of God. And it is from that place within us that we experience that oneness and we see our interconnection with all life. We can have that experience surrounding death and illness, as is very common, but perhaps it's even more powerful when it's surrounding new life. And when we witness new life entering this world, especially for the first time, as a first-time parent, wow, it transforms us. Because it is so plain to see that this little being in front of us is more than just this frail body. I remember when my own daughter Shava was born, I looked at her and into her eyes, and I felt strangely intimidated that she was not some brand new being into the world, but thousands of years old. Somehow she awoke that within me. I think we all had that experience of seeing new parents where they don't seem to be quite living in the same world as everybody else. And they walk around showing their baby to everybody. They cannot believe how powerful it is to be a new parent. And much of the time it is reciprocated because others also feel and want to be a part of that moment, and they feel the special quality of the baby and are drawn to it. We have these neighbors on our street. They live just a few blocks up from us in River Forest. They had the baby in July. And they sometimes walk around the block just asking people, do you want to see our baby? And most of us, we say yes, because we want to join that beaming joy on their faces. When you're a new parent, people are drawn to you in the supermarket, in the museum, on the streets, everywhere, because it wakes up everyone to the beauty of a soul, and not just a fragile little being, but that beauty that is beyond the external. And that experience of new life and soulfulness propels a new family into a whole new life, and their parents and even the grandparents into a new phase of life. And everybody becomes more caring, more loving, even while they lose a little sleep. It almost feels like that soulfulness of a newborn baby is something that we can all share in, because we too are all souls. We're all B'Tselem Elohim. We're all in the image of God. When you're in that space, you have no fear. You walk across the street and ask your neighbors if they want to see your baby. And you feel alive and you relate to people with love and with a common humanity and with ease and without all those usual barriers that just complicate life for no reason. And this is what Maimonides, our great medieval philosopher, teaches, that the highest level of human relationship and friendship is on the level of soul, the sharing of a common purpose. And Yom Kippur is our tradition's way of taking us to that awareness that we are more than just our exteriors. For 25 hours, we do not eat or drink. We remove ourselves from all the regular habits of life and work and exercise. And we spend a day in synagogue, or watching synagogue this year. We wear white, and there's that custom to wear a kittel in some communities, the robe that Jews are buried in, to remember us of the mortality of our bodies. And we're not to anoint ourselves or have physical relations. And our job is to awaken that soulful part of ourselves and to put the physical on the back burner, just for one day, and to be in synagogue all day long, and to sit and reflect on how you are living in the world. And you acknowledge the wrongs that you've done, the people you've hurt. Al chet shechatati. Slowly, moment by moment, thought by thought, it wears down all the barriers until finally we have the great final shofar blast and everyone is uplifted at the end. And at the end of Yom Kippur, everyone left in synagogue is usually a little bit giddy. We can be in that place for a little bit and then let it go after we eat of our meal, forget about it. Or we can make a resolve to take it deeper, to seek it out each day, to live there with intentionality and purpose. There's this teaching in the Midrash that there are different names for a human being in the Torah that reflect different ways of living in this world. There's an Ish, there's a Gever, there's a Ben Adam, a son of Adam, a human being. And to truly live as a human being, a son of Adam, is to live like that part of us that walked in the Garden of Eden, that we felt alive, felt light-filled, and felt joy and purpose, and communicated it to other people, who uplifts others, who loves, who supports, who sees injustice with clarity and calls it out, who does not get swayed by the opinions and thoughts of others, but who is not that fixed in his or her opinions either. As the Talmud says, we should be like a reed. A reed does not break in the wind, it can sway, but is also solid and will never be uprooted, even in the greatest storm. And who has no regrets, about life, and who has chipped away at their restlessness and found a place of calm and peace. And what a gift that is to see that. And that is the secret of the high priest on Yom Kippur as he enters the Holy of Holies one time a year and connects to the untouchable. And life sometimes sends us experiences to remind us of this, difficult experiences, joyful experiences. And religion creates these experiences for us so that we do not forget. And this is our task, what we are doing here today, to ask ourselves, from what place do we want to live? And to reconnect to that place of new life, removing a little bit of that restlessness, some of those regrets. And each time we do so, we are taking ourselves one small step in our world, one giant step closer to the world that God intended, a world where the lamb lies down with the wolf, and there shall no longer be war. Haneshama lach ve'aguf po'alach, chusana al amalach. The soul is yours, and the body is your creation. Have compassion on your handiwork. Gad Yantiv, Gmar Tov.